Welcome back to Jacob Rees-Mogg's State of the Nation with me, Alex Armstrong, this evening. I think Keir Starmer has just delivered the most hollow apology in modern British politics.
I am sorry. Sorry for what was done to you. Sorry that so many people with power failed you. Sorry for having believed Mandelson's lies and appointed him.
Wait, sorry for what exactly, Prime Minister? Because by your own admission, you knew Madelson had been associated with Epstein, if not to the true full extent.
Can the Prime Minister tell us, did the official security vetting he received mention Mandelson's ongoing relationship with the paedophile Jeffret Epstein?
So clear.
Yes, it did.
Well, Madelson told you he had visited and stayed at Jeffret Epstein's property before he was convicted of sex trafficking underage girls. So there's only a couple of logical conclusions here. Either our forensic former director of public prosecutions didn't consider that was a red flag, or he was completely blindsided by Madelson. Neither option screams sound judgment for a man who's meant to lead this once great country. Then there's this. Starmer's apparent attempt to twist the narrative like a victim card today after and during the apology.
Prime Minister, why was it that a man who had already twice resigned from government and, crucially, had a publicly known ongoing friendship with a convicted paedophile was appointed by you as ambassador to Washington?
It has been known publicly for some time that they knew each other. That is precisely why those questions were asked. The answers given to those questions were intentionally intended to create the impression that Madelson barely knew him.
Pay attention to that bit. It was intentionally intended to create the impression that Madelson barely knew Epstein. That is a really strange way of answering that question. Let me put to you what he's saying in layman's terms. The Prime Minister, in that so-called apology, once again did not deny he knew about the Madelson-Epstein relationship, nor did he deny that he knew Madelson had stayed with Epstein. He is simply trying to point the blame of his own lack of judgment onto Madelson. Well, I'm not that stupid, Prime Minister, and neither are our viewers here at GB News. And here's the contrast, frankly, that should make most people absolutely furious. There are thousands of grooming gang victims still waiting for something far more meaningful than a clipped tactical sorry at an event. Years of abuse, years of institutional failure, years of alleged cover-ups, and still no full national reckoning has taken place. Can you believe it? Yet when his own position is under pressure, the Prime Minister finds his contrition instantly. When campaigners demanded a national inquiry into Pakistani grooming gangs, what did he call it?
Right. Let's cut straight through the Westminster fog, shall we? When Britain's Prime Minister stands before cameras, channeling his best impression of remorse, and delivers what might genuinely be the most spectacularly hollow apology in modern British political history, we need to talk about it. Because what we witnessed wasn't contrition. It was damage control, dressed up in a sympathetic tie. Keir Starmer, former director of public prosecutions, supposed guardian of institutional integrity, the man who built his entire brand on being the adult in the room after Boris Johnson's circus, just apologized to Jeffret Epstein's victims. Noble, right? Except here's the kicker. He apologized for believing Lord Peter Mandelson's lies about his relationship with a convicted sex trafficker. The same Madelson he just appointed as Britain's ambassador to the United States. The same Madelson whose ties to Epstein were documented in official security vetting files. The same Madelson whose connections were plastered across newspapers for years. So either Starmer possesses the investigative skills of a particularly unobservant golden retriever, or something far more troubling is happening in Downing Street. And GB News presenter Alex Armstrong isn't buying the innocent act for a single second. Before we tear this thing apart piece by piece, do me a solid, smash that subscribe button and hit the notifications bell. Because if you think Westminster's establishment is going to willingly tell you this story, you haven't been paying attention. Right. Let's get into it.
And when politicians, and I mean politicians, who sat in government for many years, are casual about honesty, decency, truth, and the rule of law, calling for inquiries because they want to jump on a bandwagon of the far right.
Yes, the bandwagon of the far right, remember that. So the question now isn't just about Madelson, is it? It's about credibility, about judgment, about whether Labour MPs are prepared to keep defending, frankly, the indefensible. Because right now, vast swathes of the entire country simply do not believe a word the Prime Minister says. And to borrow a phrase,
you don't need it to be Christmas to know when you're sitting next to a turkey.
Armstrong's takedown was surgical. He didn't just question Starmer's apology, he eviscerated it, line by evasive line. Because here's what Starmer actually said, and I want you to listen carefully to what's missing. He expressed sorrow for the victim's suffering. Lovely. He said he was sorry for believing Mandelson's lies. Heartfelt. But what he absolutely categorically did not do was deny knowing about Mandelson's documented relationship with Epstein before making the appointment. That's not an oversight. That's a strategy. It's the political equivalent of apologizing for getting caught, rather than for doing the thing in the first place. Starmer deployed the passive voice like it was going out of fashion. Mistakes were made. Lies were believed, as if appointments happened through some mystical process involving tea leaves and ministerial chicken. Bones rather than deliberate decisions made by, I don't know.
And just to conclude, when you're offering an apology to the nation,
Armstrong
Prime
hammered this
Minister,
point
I'd
relentlessly,
advise this.
and rightly so.
Put on a proper suit,
Security
do up your
vetting
tie, and sing the
documentation,
national anthem.
official government paperwork that crosses the PM's desk,
As ever, love to know what you
explicitly
think.
referenced Mandelson's ongoing relationship with Epstein.
There's nothing
This
more
wasn't
important
some
than keeping
obscure
your money
footnote
and your
buried in
identity
declassified
safe
archives.
online. And with
This was
so many
recent,
VPN options
relevant,
available,
red
choosing the
flag
right one
information
can be
presented
pretty
during the
daunting.
standard
But
appointment
this
process.
video's sponsor,
The kind of information
ExpressVPN,
that should make
is
any
making the
responsible
choice
leader
easier
pause and
for
think,
GB News viewers.
perhaps sending someone with
ExpressVPN
documented
is
ties
offering
to a
up to
dead pedophile to represent
75%
Britain in
off,
Washington
plus 4
isn't
extra
our
months
strongest
free.
diplomatic play.
That's top-level
But
security
here's where it gets
from just
properly damning.
£2.49 a month.
Starmer
and
isn't some
you're
backbench
covered
nobody who
by their
stumbled into number
30-day
10.
money-back guarantee.
This is a man who
So just
spent
click the
years
link
as
in this
director
video's
of public
description
prosecutions,
or scan the QR code
a role
now.
demanding forensic
Remember,
attention
when
to
you're
detail,
online, you are
institutional
often sharing
risk
personal
assessment,
data.
and
so
ethical
hackers can steal
vigilance
your information,
that would make a
your
Benedictine
passwords,
monk
your photos,
look casual.
and your bank details.
This is someone
in just
professionally
seconds.
trained
But
to spot red
ExpressVPN
flags,
encrypts your connection,
assess credibility,
making it virtually
and make
impossible for
judgment
hackers
calls
to access
when
your
evidence
personal
points toward
information.
institutional
So why
hazard.
choose ExpressVPN?
So when Starmer
Well,
claims
it couldn't
he was
be easier to
blindsided
use.
by
With
information
just
that
one
was
click,
literally
you
in
are
official
protected.
vetting documents,
And ExpressVPN
one of two things
uses
must be true.
military-grade AES
Either his judgment
256
is catastrophically
encryption, which is the
compromised,
same standard
or he's
trusted
lying.
by the US
Neither
government to
option
guard their
inspires
classified
confidence,
information.
and both raise
With
the
their
same
new tiered
uncomfortable
plans, you can
question:
protect up
if
to
he can't properly
14
vet an
devices
ambassador,
at once
what
and
else is slipping
manage
through?
passwords securely. Live chat support is available 24/7, and it typically connects you in under a minute with a real person. Click the link in this video's description or scan the QR code to get up to 75% off ExpressVPN, plus 4 months extra for free. Start protecting yourself today with ExpressVPN.
Panel here with me, Aman Bogle and Sebastian Salek. Aman, I'll start with you. What did you make of the Prime Minister's so-called apology today?
Look, I think, Alex, it's very simple. Most people around the country understand that this is the accidental Prime Minister who managed to achieve a sandcastle majority, which is now literally slithering away simply because he's unfit to be Prime Minister. Labour are unfit for Britain. It's quite simple. The ex-head of the MI6 have come out today and said that allegedly the Prime Minister appointed Madelson before the security clearance was granted. And that sort of begs the question as to what sort of a relationship does Starmer have with Madelson? And of course, the bigger question here is there a link between Madelson and his variety of contacts in Washington and the Chagos Islands surrender?
Yeah, there's a lot packed in, isn't there? This is the problem. People are trying to unravel it, Sebastian. The charge here is that the Prime Minister's judgment, at the bare minimum, is so poor that he knew not maybe the full extent of the relationship, but he knew of a relationship with Epstein, between Madelson and Epstein, and he still decided to continue anyway, Sebastian. That is, by any standard, a man with poor judgment, is it not?
Well, everybody knew about the relationship. It was in the public domain. And what I'm surprised to see is that the media and Starmer's political opponents are jumping on him today, rather at the time when Madelson was first appointed. Now, look, I'm not here to defend Madelson. He's done an awful thing. He shouldn't have had anything to do with Epstein. And the emails that have come out this week have been completely shocking. But it all lies in that report we're going to get. We're going to get some kind of disclosure, hopefully very, very soon, that will tell us the depth of what Starmer knew when he made that decision, and that will be what all of this hinges on.
But that disclosure, let's be honest, last night it was Labour MPs that decided that it shouldn't be a Labour panel that comes out with that disclosure, but instead the intelligence committee.
It was never going to be a Labour panel.
Well, the fact that there is
no... He was going to be the cabinet secretary.
There is no confidence amongst... There is very little confidence amongst Labour backbenchers in their Prime Minister, let's be honest.
Do you think he's finished?
I think he's completely cooked, completely finished.
How long do you give it?
Well, I think we'll see something manoeuvring around the May election.
Do you think, Sebastian, the Prime Minister can continue in his job? And I think that just to pose the reasons as to why, so you can challenge the reasoning, first... People will say, well, how can any of his backbench MPs, how can he pass legislation that is difficult and controversial, which we do need to do in Britain? How can he also be trusted on his judgment? Do you think that's a man that can govern?
Yes. Look, I think it all depends on the nature of that report that we get. If it turns out that Starmer has been lying to us all and that he knew way more than he's letting on, then of course he's completely toast. If I had to guess, and I don't really want to have to guess, I think he's probably telling the truth. He's a man who built his political brand on being an honest broker. Remember those days when he stood opposite Boris Johnson in the dispatch box?
I'm not even assuming he's lying. He's been honest and said he knows. He knew about the relationship between Madelson and Epstein in the vetting process. That is the issue here. I'm not accusing him of lying about anything. He's been very open. I'm actually saying that the evidence we have at this point in time is damning enough. Boris Johnson was forced to resign over matters, particularly the current Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, tried to get Boris to resign over the birthday cake scandal in Downing Street. This is worse. This is a man whose judgment has looked at Peter Madelson, who's best friends or friendly with a convicted, prolific international pedophile, and gone, I think you'll be all right in this job.
Well, that's exactly it. The best friends stuff came out much later on, and it was after the appointment. If Starmer had known that, I'm sure he wouldn't have appointed him. It seemed to him, and it's what he said today, that Madelson gave a very light account of how well he knew
on the contrary, I think, look, let's look beyond Westminster itself. The British metropolitan liberal elite, they're all, including the metropolitan elite press, were lauding Mandelson's appointment in Washington. That sort of tells you the story of what sort of network has been operating within the SW1 bubble. And that's what this is about, The whole place is rotten. And I think it's about time that we make goodness fashionable again.
Yeah, indeed. And Sebastian, final remarks from you. There's now, Angela Rayner yesterday in the House of Commons basically twisting the knife into the back of the Prime Minister around this amendment that was, dubbed by Kemi Badenoch as a whitewash amendment to stop the public and MPs from learning the full truth. Labour backbenchers, it's gone so far that backbenchers have basically warned the Prime Minister not to go ahead with it because they will block it, which would inevitably lead to a no-confidence vote. You still think, after all of that, that the Prime Minister is going to be able to govern?
Well, we know that backbenchers within the Labour Party are a powerful bloc. There are a lot of them. We saw what happened with welfare, and that's just a reality of this government. And Starmer got through that last year. That was, what was that, about 9 months ago now? And
with U-turn after U-turn.
Well, look, we can get into whether you think they're really U-turns.
Of course they are.
The point is, he's managed to get through that so far. Let's see what comes out of that disclosure. Let's see how damning that is, and then we'll be able to make an accurate assessment of Starmer's future prospects.
This is now a zombie government, and it's about time we have a general election and get rid of
this. And what would that solve? Because we've done that time and time again.
Yes.
And that's the reason we've had Prime Minister after Prime Minister serving for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And where has that got us? Absolutely nowhere.
It's
in the national interest that we allow one Prime Minister to serve their term and to enact an agenda.
Why do you think it would benefit us?
Well, look, it's got us to an anti-national government. This is an anti-national Prime Minister.
What does that mean?
What that means is that he's not serving in British national interest.
Why?
Do you really think it was in British national interest to send Madelson to Washington, D.C. to deal with Trump, our most closest ally? I don't think that was in the national interest. And it's played out not in the national interest.
Listen, this is not going to go away, this story. There are many of them, I've said this before, but I don't think this one's going to go away. Of course, we're going to still wait. We don't know when the disclosure...
Starmer positioned himself as the antithesis of Johnson's chaos, the serious prosecutor who'd restore standards in public life. And yet here he is, defending an appointment that Johnson himself might have struggled to justify. That's not just political hypocrisy. That's a fundamental credibility collapse that no amount of carefully worded apologies can repair. Armstrong's central accusation that this was the most hollow apology in modern British politics isn't hyperbole. It's an accurate diagnosis of a statement designed to check political boxes without accepting genuine accountability. Starmer apologized for being deceived, while refusing to acknowledge his own failures of due diligence. He expressed sympathy for victims while maintaining the decisions that created the controversy in the first place. He performed contrition without demonstrating actual change in judgment or policy. And that's the signature move of a certain kind of modern politician, the non-apology, apology that sounds sincere in a 10-second clip but crumbles under any sustained scrutiny. The kind that satisfies media cycle demands without addressing substantive concerns. The kind that treats public trust as a PR problem, rather than a sacred obligation. The Madelson-Epstein affair isn't just about one questionable appointment. It's a stress test of institutional integrity, a litmus test of whether the scandals that brought down previous governments still matter under Labour, and a window into whether Starmer genuinely represents change or just better packaged continuity. Right now, the answer looks uncomfortably like the latter. And unless that disclosure report delivers a miracle, unless Starmer can somehow demonstrate that his judgment isn't as catastrophically compromised as it currently appears, this scandal won't fade. It'll metastasize into the defining crisis of his premiership, the moment when Britain realized the prosecutor turned PM couldn't investigate his own decisions with anything approaching the rigor he once demanded of others. Thanks for watching. Catch you in the next one.